So, timelines. I think timelines are the unsung hero of QS, since everyone seems to use them and nobody talks about them directly. So I did some research about timelines, the history, and then the future, which is chronozoom basically, and then how they tie in with your personal data. So our timeline's QS. I think the original QS is keeping track of your age, which is something people have been doing for a long time, but not always. And there's still a lot of cultures where they don't know their ages. The Native Americans, when we came and took over, a lot of them didn't know their ages, and still cultures out there. This book really got me into timelines in general. This is the cartographies of time. It's basically the history of timelines from before timelines existed. And there was a time when timelines didn't exist. People mostly put things in catalogs where there were sequential events. But the technology of the timeline was breaking out the universal time as something that exists whether or not there's an event on that year. And what that allowed was multiple things of data to be transposed, which is something that couldn't really exist before the timeline.
It's a beautiful book, by the way, and I think Gary said he's coming to talk. He's going to be at the...
He's going to be at the conference.
Yeah, highly recommend it. Great pictures, great reading. So timeline is basically the backbone of all the things that most of us are doing in QS. It's not necessarily part of it, but most people use time as one of their factors. And why am I doing this? Part of it is piecing together all the puzzles, all the pieces of my life, trying to figure out what happened. So this guy's really important. I'm just going to briefly talk about him. He's very prominent in this book. Joseph Priestley, he's 1733 to 1804. He did many things, including discovering oxygen. He was a scientist, a theologian, all these things. And these two are his most important charts. These were, when they were developed in England, they were about 2 feet by 3 feet, so about that size, but you could actually read the things. The first one is a chart of biography, and this is all of the famous people he knew about, categorized by what they did. So there's artists, scientists, and this goes all the way back to like the 2000 BC, or not quite that far, but the Greeks, and then all the way up to his time. And you can see the timelines of each person's life as a bar of data and show how they were related. So was this person alive when this person was alive? And you can compare the influences of people in that way.
What was the bottom row?
Here, what's that?
What was the bottom row?
Time. So this is a detail. Actually.
No, but I mean the cluster of all the people that had all the...
But down here, I think this is artists.
Okay, that's fine. I just...
Like the Renaissance or something.
Yeah. Well, he just has way more data. He has way more data about the current contemporary, and he actually thought that like way more was happening right now, which at his time. But it may be he just had more information about what was going on. What was the time when he was alive? Right. So this is kind of a detail of it, and you can see this is like BC of scientists or something, Herodotus. Okay, this is his other very important and very influential in my life. This picture is a chart of history showing the rise and fall of empires. It's basically geography is on the y-axis and time is on the x-axis. So showing, it's basically a picture of all the empires that have ever existed. And this sort of comprehensive picture is really, it's something that I think we need to have to complement the way we learn about things in life, and I think that has to do with the way infographics are becoming so popular these days. But now we have a lot more technology than just printing press, and this is the chronozoom that he was talking about, and this is basically a timeline of all of history in nested timelines with events and other data. So you can really drive into, if you go into there, you can go into further and further all the way up to Homo sapiens, and then you get actual history of civilization, history of culture, and so forth. So that's kind of the dream of putting all of history on a timeline. Wikipedia is doing some sorts of things, and I'm skeptical that it's really possible and going to be usable, but it's a wonderful project for what it's worth. Now, Ancestry.com. One of the questions earlier was: are people doing this research? The statement was QS is becoming wildly popular and growing quickly. Are people doing this life logging in the same way? And I would argue they are. Ancestry.com is humongous, and there are people doing huge amounts of data, huge amounts of picture marking. My sister really got into this and built our family tree. And the program has a lot to offer for anyone who wants to get into life logging. When you start putting pictures of people in, the program will actually prompt you with other pictures that might be related to your family. And you can say, yes, that is that person. They'll show connections, and you can go into any person that's in the database. You can share your database publicly. But I wanted to relate this back to timelines, because the picture of a genealogy is interesting, but it's kind of deceiving in that these are the levels, because these people actually might be in different generations. The way they look on here, it looks like generations are a very clear thing. So I use a program called Time Glider, which is a open, I don't know about open source, but it's a very easy to use timeline creation program that can zoom, and you can set priorities for different things. So I put my own life and all those people that you saw on the last slide, I put in their timelines of their lifespans. So I can see the people in my mother's side of my family, how they line up with people on my father's side of my family. On the top row, you can't see it at all, but I put in the U.S. presidents, I put in all the wars, I put in different sorts of things, 9/11, you can have pictures on there. But there's a lot you can do, but there's a lot still to be, that I would want to be able to do that I can't do. Here's another detail. So this is like when the male line of my father came to the United States, and I can see how it's related to the Civil War. And so that's another concept that's really important to me is I want to see my family history, but I want to see it in context. And you don't want to see everything on there, but you want to see certain bits of data at a time. So if I want to show U.S. presidents related to my family, I want to be able to do that. And I can see Abraham Lincoln was about, around the time of my, great-great-great-grandfather or something like that. Okay, now I discovered this clever little website. It's called ourtimelines.com, and it was created by these people. I think they started by trying to create a Wikipedia of their own family, but this was a spin-off, and it's basically you put in your date of birth, and it spits out a timeline of your life and major events that happened. But it's the only things they have in their database are what they put in the database. So it's what they think is important, and you can edit that, and you can add things, and as you see on the bottom here, I threw in one right here in yellow. I discovered QS at this point in time. So there's a lot you could do with this little website, but it's very limited as well. So other tools not shown in terms of timelines, Excel spreadsheets. Facebook is now really getting into the timeline, as Facebook users know, which I'm not, unfortunately. But they have some problems. They're not locally, the information is not locally stored. You can only pull inputs from certain places. There's no genealogy, no public data streams, and no QS data streams, which is another thing I would like to bring into a timeline.
And there's no American history and stuff like that.
No. That's what I mean by public data streams. Like timeline, you can actually, Time Glider, you can actually pull in things from Wikipedia and other inputs. Okay, so the dream. What's my dream of all this together? A complete timeline of my life with all my family members, friends, etc., having their timelines, events and landmarks of our life, personal data streams, that's other QS type of stuff, public data streams from a managed data collections or Wikipedia or open source data streams. All of the media of my life, so if I click on a person, I can bring up all of the pictures of that person, timestamp, geotag, face tagged, etc. And then filters, a big part of it is being able to present the data in different ways, so filtering out certain data and so forth. The ability to create nonlinear narratives. As we know, a lot of stories in our life are not always linearly narrative or temporally narrative. And you want to be able to show paths through a timeline that could go backwards and get influences from different sources, things like that. Okay, and that's it. Thank you.
Nobody objects, we'll just run a few minutes over so we can have a little conversation and then that's great. It kind of connects with what we're saying when Simon's talked that metadata, the timestamp is the crucial metadata for QS, I think, time series analysis of data.
That's one.
Yeah, or it's a crucial piece.
And geo, time and location seem to be the easy ones.
Right.
But there are others, but those are the easy ones that aren't subjective.
Because what I thought was, okay, timeline is basically objects in chronological order. How
Events.
Right. So, does that include your data? Does your data belong on the timeline? Does your heartbeat? Does every heartbeat belong on the timeline? You know, does every jump of the accelerometer, before it's even interpreted as a step, you know, or whatever, belong on? Like how?
Well, you can't
how
show
far
it,
down should we go?
To me, you can't show it all at once, but you want to be able to. So if I want to zoom in to my lifespan or to the past 3 years and then bring up the data of that versus and have some of the other data on there too, like, okay, now I can see my heart rate versus who was president, or I can see my heart rate versus what striking events happened in society.
It's going to be reflected.
I think data into one place, but being able to filter it out and show just what you need at a certain time.
Yeah,
That's the key.
Let's continue. Yeah.
So I'd like to go with that and ask, like, when you're talking about how much data you want to actually put on a timeline. So say you put like every single accelerometer raw data reading on it, and you put, you geotag every single second of your life, right? That to me is like a linear timeline, because you're just putting 10 data points, say, and you're putting it at every single second, right?
Sure.
But what you said was like how non-linearity really matters, like how you want to emphasize different things, even though time is very sequentially organized. And I just want to maybe use that as kind of a contrasting point.
Yeah, the nonlinear thing would be layered on top of the backbone of the linear data. You don't want to screw with any of your data. It's all time-stamped. The nonlinear story is a different way of presenting, and it would be nothing that would actually affect the underlying data. And it's really just one way of trying to interpret the data and use the data. Because if I want to show, a big part of this is being able to share with my family. I want to be able to give this timeline to my family and show them this is your genealogy too. Get involved and add to it. So having a kind of a wiki of my family. But if I want to show them a story of my progression in this field or something, it doesn't necessarily. It should be able to jump around and show different things.
Well, there's certain views of timelines that are popular in certain areas, like somebody who's into metabolism tracking was saying they take the timeline and they crunch it into a modal day view, for instance, where they show what typically happens at 10 o'clock, what typically happens. You can't do that unless you have it all in a good, but then in the end, the meaning doesn't necessarily come. This is and that in a sense is non-linear in the sense you're describing, and that it's not like, you don't care about every successive 10 a.m. You care about this abstract day in which, which is a compilation of all the 10 a.m.s. Or something like that, Mike, and then Stan?
Yeah, it was really interesting what you said about maybe who's president compared to the heart rate, but it would be interesting to have a timeline of every person in the United States, like what is our heart rate during Reagan and during during 9/11 or
So if I make my program and everyone gets in on it and they all upload their data stream, then there's the most massive science experiment ever. And that's what I think a lot of people are doing on the medical side, but you can also do it with stories and with pictures and all of this soft data.
If everybody did that, what use would the political campaigns make? Or do they already?
Disrupt bad politics.
Stan.
Yeah, I was just got to thinking of the different ways that you use the timeline, because we've already kind of hit on, like sometimes it seems like you're in exploratory mode of looking for connections, like is there a connection between president and my fitness or something, and then like you find the story and you want to show it, which is like the Priestley thing of like
Sure.
you want to show it, and then it seems like there's sort of different modes of how you use it. I wonder if you can think about different ways.
There might just be, there's just too many possibilities, but the dream is just the data core and then having all these different outputs. So you might use it as an experiment, or you might use it as a print out a picture of this part of my life. And I don't know, I see them all as viable ways of exploring the data. It might be one way that you go through your pictures. You might click on a person and showing the pictures of that person, or it might be, because there's no reason the picture shouldn't show up on the timeline at a certain zoom. That's the key, is everything can't be the same priority. So you have to be able to modify the priorities, and then when you zoom in and out, more data comes. Like ChronoZoom does a great job of that. You don't see everything at once, but when you start zooming in, I want to start zooming in my life, and the pictures start popping up, the most important ones, which somehow I've tagged, and they pop up with the people and so forth. So digitizing my life, basically.
This is an interface, by the way. Stan and Max and I have been talking a lot about this in the timelines. We see this very much as an interface to our own personal data, like the digital memory archives that I was talking about earlier, and where that fits into a chronology of what else is going on around us and around the world, what's going on in our families. Now, one of the things I always think about is that a lot of people grow up thinking, God, my parents had a really nice house, they were well off, they could afford to put us through college and everything, and my dad had this job, he worked at it for 30 years. They forget when he was 25 years old, the guy was struggling. He and Ma were living off of Goodwill furniture in a crummy little apartment, in the Bronx or something. And they struggled to get to that point. But we grew up always thinking, wow, I got to go out and get a job right away so I can live like my mom and dad right away. And it's a little, twisted perspective that most of us grow up with to some degree.
That goes back to what Stan did with when he was able to compare all the people of his family, the pictures of them at the same age. And I think those sorts of tools should easily be integrated if you have the backbone of the timeline of all of your data, your pictures, and so forth. You can throw, what happened to my dad when he was my age. It could pop up it could do a report for me. It would say, this guy was the president, this is the pictures of him at that time. I could have an entire report just by a muse of my mind, just a thought. To be able to see that would be amazing.
A lot of these things are increasingly accomplishable on Facebook. What's your version?
Well, I don't use Facebook. Well, my aversion to actually using it for, keeping pictures and that sort of thing has to do with control of the data. And Phil talked about this last night, but you need to have the data in your own formats, because Facebook might go away, and I don't have any faith that for them to keep my data. I don't have faith for iPhoto to tag my photos, because they use their own file format. So at this point, there's no universal enough format that I trust. I might be forced to use Facebook at some point because they are providing a lot of those tools. They don't do the genealogy yet, they don't do any of the history, and there's a lot of other things they don't do, but they are doing amazing things with face tagging searching the whole internet and face tagging every photo, it's an amazing step in the right direction in terms of this sort of collection.
Definitely a right direction, but it's not there yet, but timeline on Facebook is really cool.
Just to answer the question here, I mean, of necessity, when you have a very large website, to be able to scale, you have to be least common denominator. So if you want to take your data and observe it in different ways, you're always going to be able to do it much richer on your own laptop than Facebook can do for you at scale. So that's one reason.
You might not want to upload your...
Yes, I mean, that's a whole other issue, but aside from privacy, the ability to dig deep into your data
Right, I'm not suggesting it as an alternative.
Yeah.
I'm just saying it's a supplement.
Yeah, I mean, it's a good backup if you don't mind your data being owned by someone else.
So let's do one more question or comment. It doesn't have to be a question.
I'll get it.
Were there two?
We got two, I think.
Okay, let's take two then, yeah.
Go ahead.
There's a great iPad app I just found called Timeline Eons.
Eons?
Yeah, and it's like a free light version, but it's great. It has a lot of the features you're describing. You can mash up like historical data sets on your own. And
does it have a good input for your own data? Because that's a big chunk of it. They do
pictures.
How do I go in and put in every person in my own timeline?
Yeah,
it has to be easy.
I guess if you upgrade, you can do that. I haven't done it, but
because that's the kind of thing that I think everyone in the world should have done. It wouldn't take you that long, especially if your family's done a little bit of it. But we should all know, like, at least the last 5 generations of our family, where they were born, and the basics of their lives, because that's your context of your life and your history.
Well, okay, there was one more, right?
What are your thoughts on like multiple timeline analysis, like you and your sister, for example, where you're interacting and then you might have periods of space? Like, what have you seen in terms of those kind of tools, or how does that fit into your dream?
Yeah, being able to overlay any timeline information and input any data. I mean, my dream would be that she would be on the same program as me and we could merge our timelines. And then you'd have the ability to show your own data or both your data together and so forth. And Ancestry.com does that great. I can click on myself and it pulls me out of her genealogy line, and it focuses on my end of the picture. So it's one data set, but the view automatically adjusts to just me to focus on. And Mike could do it too, he's my uncle.
I was actually thinking that you could give me access to your timeline, because I remember all of the weird things you did when you were a kid. You might edit your own timeline, and I could add some true to it.
If I have the last say. But yeah, and that's another thing I am doing. Phil was talking about his life logging of every event of his life. I've started doing that a lot more, and you just start to put down every important thing with details, and then you can really mine your own life. And I imagine myself being 70 and going back and really looking at, where was I, who was I, what was I doing, and then you can pull out metadata on that, which is what we've all been doing.
So look, before we just close, that's great, Matt, thanks a lot.